Have you ever felt that exhaustion that comes from being around people, even when they're good people? That feeling that something inside you needs silence, distance, space to breathe without having to explain anything to anyone? It's not sadness. It's not fear. It's something else, deeper. Maybe you've wondered if there's something wrong with you. Why does everyone seem to need company so much, while you feel like your best version shows up when you're alone? The truth is, this feeling isn't weakness. It's clarity. There's a type of person who experiences the world differently. It's not that they're better or worse than others. They simply notice things that most people don't. They hear what wasn't said. They feel the weight of what's happening beneath empty conversations and automatic smiles. This type of person can't pretend everything's fine when it's not. And that's exactly why they feel a deep need to pull away. Solitude, for this person, isn't punishment. It's a refuge. It's the place where they can take off the mask and stop performing. When you're alone, nobody's expecting anything from you. Nobody's judging. Nobody's measuring. You can simply exist without needing to justify yourself. And that's rare. That's precious. There's something almost spiritual about it. It's not about religion, but about a clarity that comes when you stop adapting to others all the time. When you're immersed in the social world, you're divided between what you actually think and what you need to say to avoid causing problems. Between what you feel and what would be acceptable to feel. That's exhausting. That fragments you. Solitude puts the pieces back together. More awakened people feel this as an impulse, almost instinctive. They don't rationally decide they need to be alone. The body asks for it. The mind asks for it. Something inside them knows that being too exposed to external noise silences the internal voice. And without that voice, you lose contact with what really matters. You become just another body moving through the crowd, reacting, responding, but never really present. So the withdrawal happens. And when it does, many people around don't understand. They think you're depressed, that you're isolating yourself in an unhealthy way. But the truth is different. You're protecting yourself. You're preserving something inside you that's fragile and that the world doesn't respect. Your clarity, your sensitivity, your ability to see things as they are, without the layers of illusion that most people accept as truth. This isn't an easy choice. Because society teaches you from early on that you need to be connected, that you need to have friends, that you need to belong, and there's a part of you that believes that. But there's another part, deeper, that knows true connection doesn't come from being surrounded by people. It comes from being connected with yourself first. And that only happens in silence. That only happens when you're alone. The modern world is a noise-making machine. Not just the physical noise of streets, cars, voices, but invisible noise. The opinions you didn't ask for. The expectations that were placed on you before you even knew who you were. The pressures to be productive, to be sociable, to always be good, always optimistic, always moving. This noise enters your head and you don't even notice. You start thinking thoughts that aren't yours, wanting things that don't match you, judging your life by the standards of people who live completely different lives. And in the middle of all this, you get lost. You become a reflection of what the world expects, not what you really are. Isolation offers something that's become almost impossible to find: true silence. It's not just the absence of sound, it's the absence of pressure. It's the space where you can stop trying to be understood, to fit in, to make sense to others. And in that silence, something interesting happens. You start hearing your own breathing again. You start feeling the natural rhythm of your body, your thoughts, your emotions. The mind needs this silence to reorganize itself, to separate what's real from what's illusion, to realize which fears are yours and which were planted in you. When you're always surrounded by people, always reacting, always responding, you don't have time to do this cleaning. You accumulate. You accumulate anxiety, confusion, doubt, frustration. And all of this stays there, inside, growing. In isolation, you can finally stop and look at it. You can observe your thoughts without judgment. You can feel your emotions without having to explain them to anyone. And this isn't easy. In fact, that's exactly why many people avoid being alone. Because in silence, you encounter everything you were running from. Your fears, your sadness, your failures, but you also encounter something deeper. Your strength, your clarity, your truth. Isolation doesn't solve everything. It doesn't erase pain, doesn't make your problems disappear, but it offers something more valuable, the ability to be present with all of it, to face your own life without distractions. And when you do that, when you really look inside without running away, you gain a peace that doesn't depend on external circumstances, a peace that comes from knowing who you are, even when the world is chaotic. There's a type of rest that only happens away from others. It's not physical rest, it's spiritual rest. It's when you stop pretending, stop performing, stop carrying the weight of others' expectations. And in that rest, you recover. You recover your energy. You recover your clarity. You recover your presence. And when you return to the world, if you return at all, you come back different, more whole, more you. The biggest prison that exists has no bars. It's invisible. It's the emotional dependence on others. It's the need to be validated, approved, accepted. It's the fear of being alone because you believe that without others, you're nothing. That's the prison where most people live their entire lives without even realizing it. When you need someone to feel good, you hand over your well-being into that person's hands. And that means you're never really at peace. Because people change, people leave, people disappoint, and if your happiness depends on them, your happiness is unstable. You live on an emotional roller coaster, always hoping that someone will give you what you need. Solitude teaches you something fundamental. You're capable of being self-sufficient. Not in the sense that you don't need anyone, but in the sense that you can be okay even when you're alone. You can find meaning, joy, peace, purpose, without depending on another person to bring that to you. And when you learn this, something changes forever. You stop being hostage to external circumstances. That's real freedom. Not the freedom to do what you want, but the freedom to be who you are, regardless of who's around. Freedom from having to mold yourself to be loved, from having to hide parts of yourself to be accepted, from having to negotiate your authenticity in exchange for company. People who've never experienced this live in fear. Fear of being abandoned, fear of not being enough, fear of being alone. And that fear controls everything. It controls their choices, their relationships, even their thoughts. They say yes when they want to say no. They stay in places that hurt them. They accept treatment they don't deserve. All because the idea of being alone is more frightening than any abuse, any disrespect, any pain. But when you build an inner independence, that fear loses its power. You realize that being alone isn't the worst scenario. In fact, sometimes it's the best. Because you prefer your own company to company that diminishes you. You prefer silence to conversations that drain you. You prefer solitude to superficial connections that only leave you more lonely. This isn't coldness, it's wisdom. It's understanding that you can't build a healthy life on a foundation of neediness. You can't have true relationships if you're relating out of necessity, not choice. And that difference is everything. Necessity makes you dependent. Choice makes you free. When you develop this emotional self-sufficiency, you stop seeking in others what only you can give yourself. You stop expecting someone to fill the emptiness inside you. And you start understanding that this emptiness isn't a problem to be solved by another person. It's a space that needs to be inhabited by you. It's the place where you learn who you are, what you value, what really matters to you. And when you do this, when you really inhabit your own life, relationships change. You don't need them anymore to survive. You choose them because they add something real, not because they fill a lack. And that changes everything, because now you're free to leave when something no longer serves you. Free to say no. Free to demand respect. Free to be you, completely, without fear that it will cost you someone's company. There's an invisible line that separates two ways of seeing the world. On one side, most people live on the surface. They accept easy explanations. They follow rules without questioning. They do what everyone does because it's more comfortable, safer, more accepted. They live repeated, predictable, automated lives. And there's nothing necessarily wrong with that. It's just that it's not all there is. On the other side of this line are people who can't do that. Not because they think they're superior, but because something in them refuses to accept ready-made answers. They look at the world and see contradictions. They see patterns. They see illusions being sold as truths. And they can't just ignore it and move on. They need to understand. They need to question. They need to go deeper. These people, the solitary thinkers, live in constant tension with the world. Because the world wasn't made for those who think too much. It was made for those who accept, consume, obey, and move on. And when you're someone who can't do that, you feel out of place. You watch conversations that seem empty. You participate in events that seem meaningless, and you wonder, is it just me, or is nobody else seeing this? The answer is that many people aren't seeing. Not because they're stupid, but because they decided, consciously or unconsciously, that it's easier not to see. That it's more comfortable to live on the surface, where things make sense in simple ways. Where you don't have to carry the weight of noticing the absurdity, the injustice, the futility of so many things that society values. The solitary thinker doesn't have that luxury. They see, and because they see, they pull away. Not with arrogance, but with exhaustion. Because it's exhausting to be in a place where nobody's asking the same questions you are. Where your concerns are seen as overreaction. Where your depth is confused with negativity. So they choose isolation. Not because they despise people, but because they need a space where they can think freely, without having to simplify their ideas so they make sense to others, without having to pretend superficial things matter, without having to smile and agree when everything inside them is screaming that it doesn't make sense. This isn't elitism, it's self-preservation. Because when you're constantly surrounded by people who live on a different frequency than yours, you start doubting yourself. You start thinking the problem is you, that you think too much, that you feel too much, that you should relax and just enjoy life like everyone else seems to do. But the truth is you can't, because your mind was made to go deep. It doesn't accept shallow answers. It doesn't find satisfaction in distractions. It doesn't find peace in ignoring what's real. And that's a gift, not a curse. But it's a gift that separates you, that puts you in a lonely place, where few arrive, where few can stay. And in that place, you learn something important. You learn that mediocrity isn't about capability, it's about choice. Many people are capable of thinking more deeply, of feeling more intensely, of seeing more clearly. But they choose not to. They choose comfort over truth. They choose belonging over authenticity, and you can't judge them for that. But you also don't have to join them. There's a test that life applies to everyone, but few recognize. It's not a test of intelligence, of success, of how much you've achieved. It's a test of presence, of how much you can stand being with yourself, without distractions, without escapes, without anything to save you from the encounter with your own emptiness. Most people fail this test, not because they're weak, but because they were never prepared for it. Society teaches you to run from emptiness. It teaches you that solitude is bad, that boredom is unbearable, that you always need to be doing something, being something, consuming something, anything to not be alone with your own thoughts. But solitude doesn't let you run. It forces you to face everything you were avoiding. Your fears, your insecurities, your painful memories, your questionable decisions. Everything you buried deep because it was easier not to deal with it. And when all of this rises to the surface, when you're alone with nothing to distract you, you have two options: collapse or grow. Those who collapse run back to the world, back to distractions, to empty relationships, to anything that fills the frightening silence. And there's no judgment in that. It's a defense. It's what the body and mind do when they can't process what's being revealed. But those who grow, who really pass this test, discover something extraordinary. They discover that emptiness isn't a black hole that swallows you. It's a space where you can finally breathe, finally think, finally be honest with yourself without having to perform for the imaginary audience living in your head. This is the spiritual strength that solitude demands and builds. It's not physical strength. It's the ability to be present with your own suffering without trying to make it disappear immediately. It's the maturity to accept that pain is part of the human experience, and that you don't need another person to validate it or take it away from you. Most people never develop this strength. They spend their whole lives depending on external stimuli to feel alive. They need someone to talk to, something to watch, somewhere to go. And when none of that's available, they go into despair, because in silence, they don't recognize themselves. They don't know who they are when nobody's watching, when nothing's happening. But those who endure solitude, who really dive into it, develop a presence that's rare. A presence that doesn't depend on circumstances. A presence that remains even when everything around collapses. Because this person learned they can trust themselves. that they can bear the weight of their own existence without needing to transfer that weight to another person. This doesn't mean you'll never want company. It means you don't need it to survive. And that difference transforms you. Because now you're free to choose your connections based on what they really are, not what you need them to be. You're not looking for someone to save you anymore. You're looking for someone to share a life you've already built alone. And when you reach that place, you realize solitude wasn't a punishment. It was an initiation. It was the path you needed to walk to become whole. To become someone who doesn't lose themselves in others. Someone who remains, even when everything changes. There's a type of knowledge that doesn't come from books, from teachers, from lectures. It comes from silence, from the empty space between one thought and another. From the moment when you stop seeking answers out there and start paying attention to what's already inside you. Self-knowledge isn't an abstract concept, it's a practice. It's the act of observing your thoughts without identifying completely with them, of feeling your emotions without being controlled by them, of recognizing your patterns without judging yourself for them. And this only happens in silence. It only happens when you're alone enough that external noise doesn't dominate the internal. When you're always surrounded by people, you're always in reactive mode. Someone says something, you respond. Someone does something, you react. You're constantly adjusting, molding, adapting to what's happening around you. And in that process, you lose contact with what's happening inside. In isolation, you recover that contact. You start noticing things about yourself you never noticed before. How you react when you're alone. What you think when nobody's influencing your thoughts. What you feel when you don't have to hide or explain your feelings. And these observations are gold. Because they show you who you really are, not who you pretend to be. The human mind is like a lake. When it's always being stirred, you can't see anything beyond the distorted reflection on the surface. But when the lake becomes still, when the water calms, you can see the bottom. You can see what's down there, hidden. And that's what solitude does. It calms your mind's surface so you can see what's really happening. Many people are afraid of what they'll find. They're afraid that deep down they're bad people, weak, broken. But the truth is different. What you find at the bottom isn't monstrous. It's human. It's your vulnerabilities, your fears, your sadness, but also your strength, your wisdom, your capacity to love and feel deeply. The problem is we were taught to be ashamed of these parts, to hide them, to pretend they don't exist. So when they appear in solitude, the first reaction is horror. But if you stay, if you don't run, you start understanding that these parts aren't your enemies, they're you. And they need to be seen, accepted, integrated. This integration process is what we call self-knowledge. It's not about becoming perfect. It's about becoming whole. It's about recognizing all parts of you, the good and the bad, the strong and the weak, and learning to live with them in peace. And this only happens when you stop running. When you stop seeking constant distractions and allow silence to show you who you really are. In silence, you also learn to listen to your intuition. That quiet voice that knows what's right before your mind starts rationalizing. That feeling in your stomach that warns you when something isn't right. That sense of certainty that appears without logical explanation. These things are always there, but they're muffled by the constant noise of social life. When you're alone, you can finally hear them. And when you learn to trust them, your life changes. You stop making decisions based on what you think you should do, and start making decisions based on what you feel is right. And these decisions, even when they're difficult, take you to more truthful places, to a life more aligned with who you really are. There's a word that scares many people: emptiness. The idea of having emptiness inside you seems terrible. It seems like something's missing, that you're incomplete, that you need to fill this hole with something, anything, before it swallows you. But what few people understand is that this emptiness isn't a deficiency, it's a characteristic. People with a deeper, more introspective, more complex mind naturally carry an empty space inside them. And this space doesn't need to be filled. It needs to be inhabited. This emptiness is where creativity comes from. It's where insights emerge, connections, original ideas. It's the space where you can imagine possibilities that don't exist yet, where you can question what's taken for granted, where you can create meaning from chaos. People with superior minds aren't afraid of this emptiness. They learn to navigate it, to explore it, to transform it into something productive, beautiful, meaningful. They don't need to be constantly stimulated by external factors because their inner world is vast enough to sustain them. This doesn't mean they never feel lonely. It means they found a way to inhabit their solitude with dignity. They have deep conversations with themselves. They explore ideas, philosophies, questions that don't have easy answers. They're satisfied with the process of thinking, not just with conclusions. And that's a form of wealth most people will never experience. Because most people need constant entertainment. They need external validation. They need someone to tell them they're interesting, intelligent, valuable. But those who carry a developed inner world don't need these things in the same way. They know they're interesting because they themselves are interested in their own ideas. This isn't arrogance, it's intellectual and emotional self-sufficiency. It's the ability to find pleasure in exploring your own mind, in asking questions that will never be fully answered, in living with mystery, with ambiguity, with complexity, and still finding meaning in it. Of course, these people still value real connections, but they're selective, because they know most conversations won't touch the depth they carry inside. And there's no judgment in that. It's just a recognition that not everyone operates on this frequency, and that's okay. But it means solitude, for them, isn't a lack. It's a protection. When you have a rich inner world, you don't need to fill every moment of silence with noise. You don't need to be constantly busy to feel productive. You don't need to always be with someone to feel complete. You can simply be. And in that being, in that existing without effort, you find a satisfaction that no external source can give you. That's why truly intelligent people, truly deep people, frequently choose solitude. Not because they're antisocial, but because they found something inside them that's more interesting, more stimulating, more true than most social interactions offer. And they prefer to protect that space rather than waste it on superficial connections that leave them empty. There's an uncomfortable truth about social interactions. They cost energy. Every conversation, every presence, every exchange takes something from you. No matter how good the person is, how meaningful the connection, there's still a cost. And if you're someone sensitive, someone who absorbs others' emotions, that cost is even higher. You've probably felt this. After spending time with people, even people you love, you get home and feel like you ran a marathon. You're mentally exhausted, emotionally drained. You need hours, sometimes days to recover. And during that time, you don't want to see anyone. Don't want to answer messages. Don't want to explain why you need this space. You just want silence. This isn't pathological, it's natural. Especially for people who feel things intensely. When you're with someone, you're not just hearing the words they say. You're picking up the emotions they carry. You're feeling what wasn't said. You're processing layers of information that most people don't even notice exist. And that drains you. Solitude works as a protective shield. It gives you the necessary space to recharge, to clean your energy of everything you absorbed from others, to return to your center, to your balance. Without this time alone, you start losing yourself. You start carrying emotions that aren't yours. You start living worries that don't belong to you, and that destroys you little by little. There's something almost sacred about protecting your energy this way, because your energy is limited, and if you spend it indiscriminately, with anyone, in any situation, you won't have anything left for yourself, for your projects, for your passions, for your own life. You'll become an empty vessel, always giving, never filling yourself. Solitude teaches you to be more conscious about where you put your energy. It teaches you that you don't owe anyone anything, that you don't need to be available all the time, that it's healthy, necessary, vital to say no. Not out of selfishness, but out of self-preservation. Because if you don't protect your energy, nobody will do it for you. Many people will judge you for this. They'll think you're cold, distant, inaccessible. They'll feel rejected when you say you need time alone. But that says more about their dependence than about you. Because emotionally mature people understand that everyone needs space. That solitude isn't abandonment. That you can love someone and still need distance. What happens when you don't protect your energy is that you start resenting people. You start feeling anger about having to be present when all you wanted was to be alone. You start seeing connections that were once good as heavy obligations, and then relationships deteriorate. Not because people changed, but because you're operating empty. Solitude prevents this. It gives you the chance to return to yourself before resentment sets in. It allows you to love people without losing yourself in them. It allows you to be present when you're with them, because you're not secretly wishing you were somewhere else. You chose to be there, and that choice makes all the difference. There's also something powerful in realizing you don't need much, that you can stay days, weeks, alone, and be fine. That you don't need constant validation, constant interaction, constant presence. You can simply exist in your own rhythm, in your own time, without molding yourself to anyone else's rhythm. This doesn't mean you'll never want connection. It means when you seek connection, you're doing it from a place of abundance, not neediness. You're offering something real, not asking to be filled. And that completely changes the nature of your relationships. They become genuine exchanges instead of desperate transactions. There's a type of violence that doesn't hurt the body. It hurts something deeper. It's the violence of hurry, of superficiality, of lack of respect for the mystery of existence. It's the way the modern world treats everything as merchandise, as product, as something that can be quickly consumed and discarded. This violence is everywhere. In rushed conversations that never touch anything real. In relationships that start and end in weeks. In the way people treat each other as objects that exist to satisfy temporary needs. In the constant rush, as if existing were a race, and the only goal was to get somewhere as fast as possible. When you're someone who feels things deeply, this violence hurts you in ways you can't always explain. You go to a social event and come back devastated, not because anything specific happened, but because everything seemed empty. Because people were talking, but saying nothing. Because there was movement, but no substance. And you start realizing you don't want to be part of this. That something inside you refuses to participate in this race to nowhere. That you'd rather stay out, even if it means being alone, than contaminate yourself with this rush, with this superficiality, with this vulgarity disguised as normalcy. Isolation, then, becomes an act of resistance. Not an aggressive resistance, but a silent resistance. A refusal to let yourself be molded by values that don't make sense to you. A conscious choice to preserve something inside you that the world constantly tries to destroy. Your depth, your sensitivity, your ability to see things as they really are. This isn't escape, it's self-defense. Because the world will try to convince you that you need to speed up, simplify, adapt. That you need to stop thinking so much, feeling so much, questioning so much. That you need to be more light, more positive, more easy. And if you don't have a space where you can return to be yourself, you'll end up believing this. Solitude gives you that space. It allows you to remember there's nothing wrong with you, that your depth isn't a defect, that your inability to settle for the superficial isn't weakness, it's integrity. It's a refusal to betray yourself to fit into a world that doesn't deserve you. And there's something noble in that, in choosing to be alone instead of compromising, in choosing silence instead of empty noise, in choosing truth, even when it's lonely, instead of the shared illusion that everyone seems to accept without questioning. Of course, this has a price. You'll be misunderstood. You'll be called antisocial, difficult, problematic. People will stop inviting you because you say no too often. They'll stop trying to understand you because you don't fit into the easy categories they use to organize the world. But the price of not doing this is higher. It's losing yourself. It's waking up one day and realizing you became exactly what you always despised. That you're living on autopilot, following scripts you didn't write, performing a life that isn't yours. And that kind of death, the death of authenticity, is worse than any solitude. So you choose isolation, not because it's easy, but because it's the only way to remain whole in a world that wants to break you into small, consumable pieces. And in that choice, you find a strange form of peace. The peace of knowing you didn't betray yourself, that you remain true to what you really are, even when it cost everything. Pain is inevitable. You'll lose people you love. You'll fail at things that matter. You'll face disappointments, betrayals, disillusions. Life doesn't spare you just because you're sensitive, because you're good, because you deserve better. It hits you the same way it hits everyone. The difference is in what you do with that pain. Most people run. They distract themselves, numb themselves, busy themselves with anything that avoids having to feel what they need to feel. And that's understandable. Pain is scary, especially when it's deep, especially when it feels like it's going to swallow you. But solitude doesn't let you run. It forces you to face what you're feeling. And at first, that seems cruel. It seems like you're being punished for something you didn't do. You're alone, in pain, with nobody to distract you, with nothing to soften the weight. And you think, how can this be good? How can this help me? But something interesting happens when you stop running from pain. When you really sit with it, when you observe it, when you let it exist without trying to make it disappear immediately, it starts to transform. It doesn't disappear, but it changes form. It loses some of the terrifying power it had when you were fighting against it. You start understanding things, about why this hurt so much, about what this situation taught you, about parts of yourself you didn't know until they felt broken. And these understandings, these insights, are what we call wisdom. Wisdom isn't information. It's knowledge that comes from lived, felt, integrated experience. Solitude creates the space where this transformation can happen. Because transformation isn't quick, it isn't loud, it isn't dramatic. It happens in silence. In the slow, solitary time where you digest everything that happened, where you separate what's real from what's reaction, where you learn who you are in pain, not just in joy. There's a depth that only comes from suffering. And this isn't romanticizing pain. It's recognizing that certain truths only appear when you've been broken and had to rebuild yourself, when you faced the worst and survived, when you were at the bottom and found strength you didn't know you had. People who've never been through this live lighter lives, perhaps, but also shallower ones. They don't know the texture of existence in the same way. They don't understand that you can carry sadness and still be okay, that you can have scars and still be strong, that you can know emptiness and still find meaning. Solitude teaches you this. It teaches you that you're capable of much more than you imagined, that you can endure pains that seemed impossible to endure, that you can rebuild yourself as many times as necessary. And each time you do this, each time you cross through pain alone and come out the other side, you become more complete. Not more whole in the sense that nothing's broken, but complete in the sense that you've integrated even the broken parts. You've accepted they're part of you, that they taught you something, that they made you who you are. And there's a deep peace in accepting this, in stopping trying to be perfect and starting to be true. Suffering, when lived in solitude, also makes you more compassionate, because you know what it's like to be alone in pain. You know how scary it is, how lonely, how difficult. And when you see someone going through this, you don't offer easy solutions. You don't say everything will be okay in an empty way. You simply acknowledge their pain, because you know your own, and that's rare. It's precious. It's something only those who really walked through the dark valley can offer. It's not pity. It's not condescension. It's recognition. It's a way of saying, I know, I've been there, and you'll survive. Not because it's easy, but because you're stronger than you think. There's a lie society tells, that you need to always be happy, that you need to always be motivated, that you need to always be progressing, improving, evolving. And if you're not, something's wrong with you. You need therapy, medication, a new life plan. You need to fix this. But the truth is, life isn't a straight line upward. It's a cycle. There are moments of growth and moments of stagnation, moments of connection and moments of isolation, moments of joy and moments of deep sadness. And all these moments are necessary. They're all part of being alive. The problem is we were taught to cling to people, to outcomes, to expectations, to versions of ourselves we want to be. And when these things inevitably change or disappear, we suffer. Not because change is bad, but because we're fighting against it. Solitude teaches you detachment, not in the sense that you stop caring, but in the sense that you learn to hold things lightly, to love without grasping, to value without needing to possess, to be present without demanding things remain exactly as they are. This is liberating in a way that's hard to describe. Because when you're no longer desperately attached to what you're afraid of losing, you can actually enjoy it. You can be present. You can love completely, knowing nothing lasts forever, and that's okay. Impermanence doesn't remove value. In fact, it increases it. You also learn to detach from expectations. From expectations you have for your life, for your achievements, for your future. You stop measuring yourself against metrics that don't make sense for you. You stop living in constant comparison with what others have, with where you should be at your age, with what you should have achieved by now. And when these expectations fall, when you stop carrying that weight, you discover a peace that's quiet and deep. A peace that doesn't depend on everything working out. That doesn't depend on you being loved by everyone. That doesn't depend on you being successful according to external standards. It's a peace that comes from within. From knowing you're okay even when things aren't. Solitude also teaches you to detach from the need for recognition. You stop needing others to see your value, understand your depth, recognize your struggles. You know who you are. You know what you've been through. You know what you've achieved, what you've survived, what you've learned. And that's enough. You don't need witnesses to validate your existence. This doesn't mean you become apathetic. It means you become selective about what affects you, about where you put your heart, about who you share your truth with. You're not offering these things to just anyone anymore. You protect them. You offer them only when there's reciprocity, respect, depth. And when you do this, when you live from this place of healthy detachment, you realize life gets lighter. Not because you stopped caring, but because you stopped caring about what doesn't matter. You learn to differentiate what's essential from what's just noise. And you chose the essential. This peace that comes from detachment is different from joy. It's calmer, more stable, deeper. It doesn't depend on good things happening. It's there underneath, like a foundation, even when the surface is agitated. And you can trust it. You can return to it when everything else is chaotic. You can rest in it when you're tired of fighting. Solitude gives you access to this peace. Because in silence, without others' voices telling you what you should want, what you should do, who you should be, you can finally hear what really matters to you. And when you hear that, when you live aligned with that, you find a tranquility that no external success, no external validation, no external connection can give you. In the end, it all comes down to one simple question. Do you want to live a true life or an approved life? Because you can't have both. Not completely. At some point, you'll have to choose between being accepted and being authentic. Between fitting in and being true to yourself. Most people choose acceptance. And there's no judgment in that. It's easier. It's more comfortable. It's less lonely. When you live according to what others expect, you always have a place to go. You always have people around. You always have approval, recognition, belonging. And these things are valuable. They're even necessary to some extent. But they have a price. And the price is you. It's your truth. It's that part of you that doesn't fit others' expectations. That strange, deep, different part that you learn to hide because you know nobody will understand. And the more you hide it, the more you lose yourself. Until one day you look in the mirror and don't recognize who's looking back anymore. Choosing solitude, choosing to be alone instead of compromising, is choosing authenticity. It's saying, I'd rather be who I am, even if it means being alone, than be who others want me to be, just to have company. And that's one of the most courageous decisions you can make. Because solitude isn't easy. It tests you. It confronts you. It forces you to face all the parts of yourself you wanted to avoid. But it also frees you. It frees you from the prison of having to perform all the time. From having to be pleasant, understandable, acceptable. You can simply be. And in that being, in that existing without masks, you find something many people will never find. Yourself. Authenticity isn't about being perfect. It's about being real. It's about accepting your contradictions, your failures, your quirks, and deciding they're part of who you are. That you're not going to apologize for them anymore. That you're not going to try to fix them to fit better. And when you live from this place of authenticity, something changes in your relationships. You stop attracting people who want you because you're convenient. You start attracting people who want you because you're you. And these people are rare, but they're real. And one real relationship, however rare, is worth more than 1,000 superficial ones. Solitude prepares you for this. It teaches you to be okay alone first. To not need external validation to know you have value. To not depend on another person to make you feel complete. And when you're in that place, when you're complete alone, you can connect with others in a true way. Not because you need them, but because you choose them. That's the freedom solitude offers. The freedom to live according to your own inner truth. To make decisions based on what's right for you, not on what will please others. To say no without guilt. To say yes without fear. To exist in the world your own way, even when that way doesn't make sense to anyone but you. And in the end, when you look back at the life you built, you won't regret having been alone. You'll be proud. Because you were true to yourself. Because you didn't betray your essence to fit in. Because you chose truth over comfort. And that choice, that fidelity to yourself, is what makes a life worthwhile. Being alone isn't the end. It's the beginning. It's the place where you discover who you really are when nobody's watching, when nobody's judging, when nobody's expecting anything from you. And when you discover that, when you really know yourself, you can finally start living. Not the life others planned for you, but yours. The only life that really matters. Solitude isn't a problem to be solved. It's a choice to be honored. It's the path through which deep, sensitive, and awakened people find themselves. It's the space where you can finally stop performing and start living. Where you can be true, complete, free. If you're alone now, know there's nothing wrong with you. You're not running away, you're finding yourself. And that's the most important work you'll do in your life. If this video touched something in you, leave your like and subscribe to the channel. And remember, the journey inward is never lonely when you finally find yourself.